Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. My name is Joe Sellepack. I'm the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches, and today I'm your Encounter host. Along with me I have Joanne from the Faith in Action Volunteers Program, and Jessie Carnell from Alzheimer's Association. She is the Associate Director.
Associate Program Director.
Associate Program Director. I got to get that title correctly inserted in there. Welcome to Encounter this morning. Joanne and Jessie are here to talk to us a little bit about the prevalence of Alzheimer's inside of in our community and ways in which we can help support Alzheimer's caregivers. And so let's start off a little bit by talking a little about what Alzheimer's disease is and why should we be concerned about it?
Well, Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurological degenerative disease. It eventually will kill off all pieces of the brain that allow for functioning as a human. So everything we do, from speaking verbally to one another, being able to reach out and hold somebody's hand, recalling memory, is commonly associated, obviously, with Alzheimer's disease. But it affects the person's ability to recall those memories, interact on a social level, engage in activities that use executive functioning, so planning and execution of plans that are created, and it affects people physically as well. We may begin to see a shuffling of the gait, a rigidity in their form, disruption of balance, their ability to maintain their daily functioning levels. So challenges in communication, as I mentioned, but also physical care of themselves. So it really affects the entire person, not just the memory that we typically think of with Alzheimer's disease.
So what would be some of the hints that, so if you were in relationship to someone, they were struggling with this disease, but they were trying to hide it or cover it up, because I would imagine that most people are fairly embarrassed by it, but so what would be some of the hints that you look for?
Well, there's definitely a stigma around the disease, and that's something that we at the Alzheimer's Association are working very diligently to decrease, and by allowing people with the disease to still use their voice, to become public advocates, to become advocates for themselves and others who have lost their voice. With Alzheimer's being the 6th leading cause of death in America, it's essential that people begin to be aware of the 10 warning signs. And that's published information that the Alzheimer's Association can provide. But some of the top signs around indications that we should be speaking with our physician are obviously that memory loss, short-term memory loss, an individual not being able to recall what they had for breakfast, not remembering about a doctor's appointment, perhaps forgetting the names of familiar faces as the disease moves forward. Difficulty in accomplishing familiar tasks is also another warning sign. So if somebody is having a difficult time keeping up on their budget, making sure that their bills are paid and that the right amount is sent to the appropriate company. Also, maybe not being able to follow along with their favorite hobbies or tracking the baseball stats. That's indicative of a time we need to be speaking with a physician about what we're observing in our loved ones. So social withdrawal is one of the big signs and symptoms as well.
All right. Well, and so they can get all this information by contacting you at the Alzheimer's Association.
Absolutely. We have a helpline that's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's translation services available, so no matter what language you speak or feel most comfortable speaking, there's a dementia care expert on the other end of the line that can work with you to assess for those warning signs, to take a look at what you're observing in yourself or someone else, as well as walk you through steps to providing good quality care.
And that number is 1-800-272-3900.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they can get any of the information that you just got through talking about, but then also be able to connect with others who might be able to give them some wisdom as to how to approach the long-term care of the person, right?
Absolutely, and the emotional needs of both the caregiver and the individual with the disease. There is a mental health professional on the other end of that line who can work with you on coping skills for the grief and the loss that is often associated with the disease, and also ways to look at it from more of an empowerment or a strengths-based strategy to give you the tools and resources you need to provide good quality care.
Now, Joanne, we're here also to talk a little bit about some of the good news that we've received about how our organization at the Broome County Council of Churches and Faith in Action in particular is going to be partnering with the Alzheimer's Association.
Right, yes. We are very excited. Jessie and I have been working together for a while now, putting together a program where we will be recruiting Faith in Action volunteers who'd like to help those family caregivers with some respite care. And Alzheimer's Association, Jessie per se, will be training those volunteers, 8 hours worth of good training on how to deal with people with Alzheimer's. They would be working with those folks in their homes so that the family caregiver can take a break of about 3 hours. We're going to try to do a 3-hour block of time of respite. So the family caregiver can get out of the house for a little bit, tend to their own appointments or whatever they need to do or want to do for a few hours.
Now, how important is that for a caregiver?
It's very important for caregivers to have that break. We know of caregivers who are working 24/7 with their loved one. They are the ones who they are day in and day out together. And the mental health of the caregiver definitely is affected, so we definitely want to have that caregiver take some breaks. And if we can do that, even if it's 3 hours once or twice a month, or hopefully it would be more, but we would start out that way to see how it would progress.
Now Alzheimer's, why would it be important for us to give training to individuals who are coming into that specific, to a person with that specific disease? What are some of the things that they would learn?
Absolutely. We just completed our first training, and as Joanne mentioned, it was 8 hours worth of training. And I think it's so important to prepare the volunteer going into someone's home to understand what the disease is. So what are the causes of Alzheimer's disease? What is the trajectory of the disease? What is happening to the brain physically that are resulting in these symptoms that we see exhibited by the person with the disease? Allowing for the volunteer to understand the science behind the disease allows them to develop or further develop their compassion, their patience, and the strategies that they utilize to employ good sound communication tactics, ways to respond to de-escalate anxious or agitated behaviors, ways to engage socially, create a connection with that person, and allow for them to develop some good volunteer boundaries and self-care practices, because we know for the caregiver that's in the home on that 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis, it can be very tiring.
Right.
Understatement of the year, it can be exhausting to provide care. So by placing a trained volunteer into the home, we can ensure the safety of the individual with the disease, the safety of the volunteer, and the quality interaction that's going to incur. We utilize an approach called the best friends approach. So we train the volunteer to create a connection with the individual with the disease that is more than just providing care or providing supervision. It's connecting on what's important to that person. Perhaps they were an avid race car collector. Perhaps they spent their entire life cutting hair, or they were an attorney. We want to inform the volunteer what the person's history is so that that connection can be real and genuine and deep, not just a surface encounter.
Yeah, when I was a pastor at Orchard Park Community Church, one of the members, Brownie was her name, had Alzheimer's disease, and she was in a nursing home. And I would go to visit her and take communion with me, and we'd read the scriptures and sit together for just a little while. And generally I'd have a family member with me too. And what was so interesting is that as we would do the service, we always say the Lord's Prayer, and we would do some of the actual liturgy that we did at the church. She would be repeating along with us, and the daughter would be so moved by the fact that something connected with with her, and she saw a little life in her. That it was enough to make her cry. You know, it was like one of those kind of, and I would laugh, and she would say, "Thank you for coming. Thank you," because it was just that little thing that connected with that person.
Absolutely, and that's what this program is about, is not only providing that respite to the caregiver, which is absolutely essential. I mean, studies have shown that in one particular study, for example, over the course of a year, caregivers were enrolled and provided 4 hours of respite per week. 64% of those caregivers reported that their physical health was much better than before the respite began. 74% of those caregivers reported that their emotional health was much better before the program, or excuse me, after the program came to completion. And over 50% of those caregivers reported that the quality of life experienced by the care receiver was exponentially higher after that respite program. So we know that the use of OCPAD, or outreach to caregivers of persons with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, can make a lasting impact on our community members.
Right.
Now there's a training that's going to be coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
So what are the dates, and how can people get connected?
Okay. Well, on March 20th there will be a forum right at Broome County Council of Churches that people can attend. Responses are appreciated, but people can feel free to come on that day between 2 and 4 p.m. And Jessie will be giving an overview and the 10 warning signs and how it affects people. And then after the forum, people will have an opportunity to decide whether they'd like to help as a respite volunteer. And the following month, in April, we have 2 training dates, April 18th and April 25th. Each are 4 hours in the morning from 9 to 1. And that training will be held at the Northern Broome Senior Center in Whitney Point.
So again, that's Wednesday, March 20th.
Right.
From 2 to 4?
Yes.
Do people need to call to register?
If they do, it's definitely appreciated, so we know how many packets to have and other handouts and so forth. So they can just call me at 724-9130.
And they can ask for Joanne Case.
Yes.
Or Faith in Action Volunteers, and
Yes.
somebody should be able to direct them to
That's fine, yes.
Right, very good.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be an exciting new venture that we're embarking on together.
Yes.
And this was made possible in a way from a grant that was offered to
Yes.
us. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We applied to the Community Foundation of South Central New York Women's Fund. And they granted us a little pot of money, $1,750, which is wonderful. And we will be using those funds to help with the training, provide some supplies to the volunteer respite caregivers. Some of the activities that we hope that they will be enjoying with the care receivers will be things such as a large puzzle book or something else that would be meaningful activities for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. So that will be covered. Some of those things will be covered.
I found that to